Yo, yo, yo. Hello and welcome back to the Lenko Show. I am your host, Alex Lankowski from Alex Lankowski Performance, relatively simple business name. I come to you today with a relatively substantial issue, and this is not me campaigning for political office in any way whatsoever. I'm not ranting about anything. I'm not surprised by anything. I am simply going to dissect some information which kind of dissects and breaks down what we all already know realistically to be true. Um, Before I do go into that, I came across a really lovely quote this morning, which is ask not for a lighter burden, but for broader shoulders. And in terms of a big burden, this is one hell of an issue. This is a big one. And we're going to need some pretty broad shoulders to be able to fix this. And also to be able to handle the truth. Little side note for the snowflakes amongst us, which, well, you know, I know that you are not a snowflake. If you are listening to me ranting and raving every week, I know for a fact you are not a snowflake. But there are plenty of people out there. So if you do need to share this with someone, this is just a headline note for them. Now, here we go. The number of obese people worldwide is now over 1 billion. Billion. That's not it's not million, not an M. Billion. 1 billion people worldwide are obese. How the fuck did we get here? How can I think it's really difficult because obviously as a health and fitness professional, you're probably looking at me going, oh well that's brilliant for you. You work in that industry, you've got the potential to fix that problem. Like realistically, I should be walking around looking at all these excessively obese, overweight people and just seeing pound signs and dollar signs over their heads and thinking how much money I'm going to milk out of it. And it is simply not the case. What I can tell you is that the vast majority of my client base are actually very, very fit, healthy, functioning, useful, strong human beings. And strength is never a weakness. We know that. So if you want to be able to handle the burden, handle the load, carry, support your family, support yourself, be able to live a high quality of life all the way through to the very end, which, we all get there at some point, then being fit and healthy is never going to be a negative. It's never going to be a negative. So how do we get there? How do we get to that point? I'm not going to go into how we got to the current point where a billion, we've got a record number of fat people walking around the planet weighing us down. Um, what I am going to do instead is I'll break down the study. I'll give you some of the numbers. I'll give you a bit of clarity about how they carried it out. And uh, we'll I'll kind of go through some fixes that I think will be relatively useful. So just first and foremost, at the forefront of this, the research has been published by the Lancet Journal, which shows 879 million adults and 159 million children were obese in 2022. And in the most recent year included in the analysis, in the UK, around 16.8 million people are living with obesity, which I say that we know this problem exists. You can see it with your very eyes. Whenever you walk around a supermarket, a town centre, even in a gym, although if you're for the people that are in the gym, at least they're in the right place. At least they're actively participating in what I refer to as saving their own life. So around 16.8 million people are living with obesity. What's that? About 20%, maybe 15% of the UK population. It's quite a big number. It is a high percentage, which includes 8 million women, 7.4 million men, 760,000 boys, and 590,000 girls. So over 500,000 girls and 750,000 boys, according to this study. And the study has been put together and run by the non-communicable diseases. Do they call them a committee? Do they call themselves? How do they refer to them? The non-communicable diseases risk factor collaboration. There's a mouthful for you. So get that through you. Get that through you. Anyway, so non-communicable diseases to start with are also known as chronic diseases. They're health conditions. They tend to be long duration, result from a combination of genetic, physiological, environmental, and behavioral factors. So when we're looking at how to fix this problem, we need to understand that there are genetics at play. The environment plays a huge part, to which extent we don't exactly know, but certainly behavior. So two of those things we can control, the genetics and the physiological, a little bit less so, but still, I think certain gene expressions given over time, if you are put in the right environment with the right behavioral characteristics, certain gene expressions can come to the forefront and others can be mitigated and limited. So can we, like, when I talk about fixing problems, we always look at what can we actually control in the first place to fix it. And in this instance, it's the environmental factors and the behavioral factors. If we can work on those and control those, it gives us a chance. It gives us a fighting chance. The rest of it, you can't do anything about. Genetics, you're born with it. It's what you've got to play with. How can you get the best out of yourself? Being born, I was about to say being born isn't a death sentence. It kind of is. You're going to be born, you have to die at some point. So, oh, that's a weird way of thinking about it. Doesn't mean being born doesn't mean whatever you're born with doesn't mean you have to live a shit life. Do everything in your power to live a great life, live your best life, and have fun along the way. So, just a couple of examples of non-communicable diseases. You got cardiovascular diseases, heart attack, stroke, etc. Cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, and diabetes as just a couple of examples for you. So if we can eradicate and limit some of the contributors towards those diseases, gives you a better chance of living a healthier life. Now, just backing into the numbers again, according to this research, according to the data, obesity in children and adolescents, quadrupled from 1990, quadrupled from 1990 to 2022. So in space of 32 years, it's quadrupled. I mean, what's that? One generation? And I wonder what's happened in the last 32 years to contribute to that. Anyway, as I said, I'm not going into why this has happened, why we are currently where we are, but they're the numbers. The rates in adults doubled. So if you think that there was previously 8 million obese adults, there's now 16. Is it going to be 32 next time? So in another 32 years, 32 million adults, which would currently be just under half of the UK population. And in that same period, rates of underweight children dropped and halved in adults as well. So less people are struggling as a result of, well, I suppose, do we call it food poverty? Do we call it energy poverty in terms of calorie poverty, malnutrition, undernutrition? Those rates have dropped and will continue to drop, and we are just going off the other end of the scale. And when you consider people don't seem to be able to afford to live, but we're able to afford to get fatter, little bit counterintuitive. However, I do understand that healthy food can be expensive. Healthy eating can be expensive. I'm not going to go as far as 30p Lee Anderson suggesting certain nutrition tactics to circumvent a really tight budget. I don't want to go into that. That's not going to be my main priority today. But also this leaves me in a really tricky position. Obviously, with the UK election coming up this year, I have no idea who I'm going to vote for. what I'm going to vote for. I think every single one of them is an embarrassment, quite frankly. Um, I think for me, I'll be certainly paying close attention to any sort of health based, should we say, well, not necessarily propaganda, but priorities. Because I certainly think, obviously, when we consider the state of the nation, the state of the UK, the NHS is always a fundamental cornerstone of any political campaigning. And my firm, my personal belief is that I don't want to get too much into politics today, but I don't want to get too much into politics at all. But my firm belief is that the NHS is overused and abused. These are things that I've seen myself. I've spoken to doctors. I've got people in the family who work in the NHS. I've spoken to people that I train who work in the NHS. It is 100% overused and abused. Now, the mechanisms for the overuse, don't want to go into, but when it comes to this kind of thing where we've got over 16 million people in the country who are suffering with a disease that is perfectly within their power to control and mitigate, relying on NHS services to control the very problem that they've created in the first place, I find very difficult to stomach when you consider the amount of money spent in terms of taxes, healthcare, and provisions for preventable diseases versus people that aren't getting treatment for things that they need for diseases that are not of their own making and are certainly life threatening. I don't understand why more isn't being made of this situation. Is it a lazy thing? Is it a lazy mentality? Is it a I don't want to look after myself because it's effort? Is it I'd rather just look after other people around me and just get them to be fit and healthy versus, like, for instance, looking after your kids to do that? Or is it like I really have always struggled to understand why more people don't care about their own health and fitness. I really have struggled to kind of get my head around that. And I'm not going to lie, it is difficult. And beyond it being a bit of effort, I kind of get stumped. There's a little bit of a stumbling block there where I struggle to get beyond that barrier of I don't want to look after myself because it's effort. And then, like, pointing out that we've got, those numbers there, 760,000 boys, 590,000 girls in the UK being obese. That's over 1 million kids who are obese. 1 million kids in the country are obese. Let's say children and adolescents. So again, coming into fixes, realistically, I would suggest if you have a if you I don't want to sound, I don't want to say anti-fat. I don't want to be rude. I don't want to put people down. But if you have a fat child, I've just got to call it what it is. If you have a fat child, to me, I would see that as child abuse because you are supposed to be a guiding light for your child. You're supposed to be the educator, the leader, the key focal point of showing them how to live, how to behave, how to navigate life's issues, and how to get the best out of yourself. And again, this is where I think it's really important for people to recognize that when it comes to leading other people, it starts with them. If you can control your own habits, your own behaviors, and physically demonstrate the preferred way to go about business, especially to your own kids, if you can be the shining example to them, it gives them a chance. Whereas if you're not, if your habits and behaviors don't add up to what you're telling your kids, I think that just results in confusion as a child. So, well, you're telling me to behave and eat like this and eat these things, but you do X, Y, and Z. You smoke 20 a day, you drink every night, you eat dessert every single night with tubs of ice cream all over the place. You rarely eat any fruit and vegetables, yet you're telling me that I can't do any of those things and I have to do this. I mean, obviously, as a child, you certainly shouldn't be smoking. But again, the examples, the behaviors, when things don't match up and it becomes incongruent, you get that diversion between how someone should be led and should be guided versus the reality of what you're actually doing as a parent. I think it puts the kid in a very difficult situation where they cannot fully understand and comprehend the vision moving forwards, which is then going to lead to all kinds of inconsistencies. And ultimately, the bigger issue where they go, well, this was how I was parented, so that's how I'm going to parent. And the problem gets passed on and multiplied, and we get the result, as we can see right now, with record numbers of obese people, over 1 billion people worldwide struggling with obesity. I say struggling, managing, getting by, living with obesity. And again, record expenses on the NHS, causing the NHS to crumble. I'm not saying it's all down to fat people, but it's a huge part of it. I think more money was spent on healthcare for the likes of cardiovascular diseases and um, diseases caused by obesity than anything else in the NHS. And I think that's year on year on year. And that amount is always only ever increasing. Anyway, the general trend, the data shows that globally obesity rates among children and adolescents quadrupled, as I said, from 1990 to 2022, and rates amongst adults doubled. And it makes obesity, this makes obesity the most common form of malnutrition in many countries. So, you know, in terms of global poverty, we're doing all right with when it comes to food and eating and putting on weight and managing the calorie intake. So food poverty isn't as much of an issue. Obviously, it's still a problem in a lot of countries, but certainly not in the UK to the extent that say to the extent that we're told, but say the extent that people are malnourished through undereating, which I'm actually reading a very say dark book at the minute. It's called Bloodlands. And the reason I'm reading it is because it's essentially it's about the war in Eastern Europe between Hitler and Stalin, where my family originated in the lands between, let's say, what was Poland, but between Germany and Russia. And one of the key mechanisms for wiping out millions of people, was collectivist food policies and essentially starvation, where people were just skin and bone. You would just walk past dead bodies on the street. People would be sat outside, queuing outside a bakery, and they'd be dropping dead in the queue. They were that hungry and that starved. And some of the stories in there, some of the information, all first-hand accounts that have been passed on, really quite alarming. So we certainly have different problems to that at the moment, which say is a positive, but this is a problem we need to control and get a hang of. Anyway, excuse me, I just needed to cough a bit then. I didn't want to catch it on the mic. So anyway, just to kind of back up and highlight what some of those numbers mean. In the UK, the obesity rate amongst adults increased from 13.8% to 28.3% for women and 10.7% to 26.9% for men, which is that is a massive increase. And then the numbers for kids, again, they jumped from 4.7% in 1990 to 10.1% for girls, and from 4.3% for boys to 12.4%. And in terms of the global obesity rate, it more than doubled in women, tripled in men, and quadrupled in girls and boys. Some of the places with the highest prevalence of obesity include Tonga, American Samoa, Polynesia, Micronesia, the Cook Islands, and Niue, which is interesting. I never would have thought of those countries as being, particularly obese, but there we go. I suppose we learn something every day. Oh, here we go. So the data also showed that globally, as of 2022, around 532 million people are underweight, including 183 million women, 164 million men, 77 million girls, and 108 million boys. Why are more boys underweight than girls? Same goes for men. That's curious. And in the UK, around 981,000 people are underweight. And again, there's a breakdown of those numbers between boys and girls, men and women, which I'm not going to go into. But so we can see that being underweight is still a big issue. Nearly a million people are underweight, but how do we clarify that as an issue? Because again, this study was carried out using BMI, which it's not the ideal measure, but obviously it's what they have to go with. So again, the reason for it, BMI is calculated between a person's weight and height to understand kind of their levels of, I say levels of obesity, but you get a BMI score. And the reason that gets used because it's been so used worldwide over decades, probably like 30 odd years or so. That has been the primary measurement for studies like this. So this particular one, the team gathered data from more than 3,000 population studies with 222 million people. And that's essentially where the numbers have come from and the reason that they use BMI. So even though it's an imperfect measurement for determining the extent of body fat and how obese somebody is, it because it can be obscured by muscle mass. Obviously, muscle is denser, it's heavier than fat. Thus, if you are particularly muscular, you will come out with a higher BMI score and be classified as obese, even when you're not. And I've got something for you on that in a second as well. But yes, it's a measurement that gets used just because it is so broadly and widely used. And not for a moment do I believe that there are nearly a million or over a million particularly muscular kids running around out there in schools. For a second, I do not believe that. And just to clarify that the NHS states that for adults, a BMI of over 30 is considered to be obese, and a range of 25 to 29.9 is considered to be overweight. Anything between 18.5 to 24.9 is considered to be a healthy weight. And if you do want to check your own BMI, you can find a very simple online calculator. All you need to know is your height and your body weight, and you will be aware. You'll get your BMI score. I am classified as overweight. I mean, I am about just a shade under 100 kilos, 180 centimeters. But I did my body fat assessments and I got some relatively decent scores on that the other day, so I'm fairly happy with that. Feeling good, feeling smug, feeling good about myself. So yes, you calculate your own body weight, go and work that out for yourselves, and do what you will with the information. I'm not going to lie, if you train frequently, if you're in the gym frequently, if you participate in sport, if you're an athlete, your BMI score is going to be pretty irrelevant. In fact, very irrelevant. Don't use it. Use a body fat percentage score, or very simply just take photos of yourself. You'll get an idea of the levels of body fat. If you've got someone that can measure it accurately, go and do that. I had a situation the other day where I was speaking with a client I was working with in the gym, and we were actually talking about BMI. So his lad was a very young, fit, healthy, played a lot of rugby, and I think he said to me that he's got a six pack, he's in really good shape, very muscular, very toned, and at school they were doing some measurements. Obviously, they've done height and weight, and they've worked out the BMI scores. I think this might have been as per government guidelines to that schools had to do this or something, and it ended up being a situation where this parent received a letter home informing him that his child was obese, and is obviously in that situation. You look at the letter, you think he's got a six pack. What is this all about? Um, and then that obviously leads to conflict with the schools. And this is where I don't know. We're just living in this world at the minute where people are blindly following what the system tells them. It's like, oh, if the numbers say this, then that person is that. We'll put them in that box, that bracket, send that letter home. Someone's clearly not engaged the brain, sign the letter off, gone, yeah, that kid clearly is obese, despite the fact he's winning in the cross country team. He's playing first team rugby for us, and he's one of the best athletes that we've got. We're gonna tell his parents that he's obese. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Engage your bloody brain for a second and just think, for crying out loud. Anyway, we need to start thinking more. Anyway, in this situation, I've been thinking about how we can actually potentially start to fix it. So I'll just run through a couple of things. Obviously, don't hold me to this and go, oh, well, how are we going to do that? I'm just, these are kind of some headlines and base level thoughts that I've had. Number one, improve affordability of healthy and nutritious food. And I do think a big part of that would be if we can grow more available foods locally. For instance, don't go start nailing farmers. And I think the government have been aiming to do this, where they're nailing farmers, telling them what they can and can't do, putting their costs up, lower the make it easier for farmers to farm. Let the farmers farm, for God's sake. Like, they're providing food for all of us, and don't necessarily export it all. Like, if we're able to keep it local, keep it local. If you're able to grow any of your own food, do that. And I would also say, don't just bypass the fruit and vegetable section in a supermarket. I do think it's very useful that all tends to come first and towards the start of the shop. So as you walk in, you have no option other than to walk through the fruits and vegetables section. I'm literally thinking actually as well about my local Sainsbury's. Don't always shop there, by the way. I'm not that well off yet. And again, the fruits and vegetables section is at the forefront of the shop. But if you go slightly to the left of that, you are bombarded with the crap aisle. You've got all the offers, discounts of all the seasonal chocolate and like Easter eggs, essentially like your key offers aisle. And even when it's not Easter eggs, it's something else. It's all junk food and crap you can throw in your lunch boxes really, really quickly. Things that you don't need. So improve the affordability of healthy and nutritious food. Um, a big part of that as well, I think, is understanding how to cook, what kind of foods to eat, and being able to manage a budget, which I know doesn't sound exciting in any way whatsoever, but if you can portion meal sizes, plan foods, and consider, like, I think there's a belief that healthy and nutritious food has to cost an arm and a leg. It's simply not. Well, I don't think it's. I say it's simply not true. I don't think it's 100% accurate or fair to necessarily say that. I think where you shop, when you shop, um, what you buy, for instance, what you buy at the time of the year. If strawberries are in season, mint, cheaper. At the minute, they're like £4 for a couple of 100 grams of strawberries, which is crazy. So consider what you're buying. Is it in season? If there's a large availability of it, obviously then it's going to be slightly cheaper. And this, we should be eating a seasonal diet, especially in the UK. It's what our bodies have evolved for. It's the land that we live in. Um, packaging. Oh, this is always a fun one. So obviously you know what they do to cigarettes, where they put like a dirty lung on it or something like that, or someone's manky heart. Uh, I feel like, imagine a box of cereals, like kids cereals, like Cocoa Pops kind of thing, with a really fat child on the front. Sitting on a park bench, wanting to play football with his mates, but he can't run. That kind of. I think we should do. Do we get to that kind of vulgar level? We won't do, because that's a bit too extreme. But that's the kind of example I'm thinking. And in all seriousness, the actual thinking behind this would be, for me, packaging. Um, make it more obvious as to what is in it. Just make it more obvious. Then, I mean, in terms of making it more obvious. So no, at the minute we've got the little food labels where it's got the little pie chart of red, orange, green. Like no one really looks at that. No one pays attention to it. And this is the other hard part of fixing this problem. Like, yes, we can improve nutrition labels. We could. I've got another bit of advice on what I do to nutrition labels coming up, but so I don't want to kill that idea yet. But 9 times out of 10, you know what you're eating. You know, if you go in and you buy a Mars bar, you're not surprised with what's in it. You know it's a Mars bar. You know it's, I would say, junk food. You know it's a high calorie, high sugar, high fat snack that isn't, particularly nutritious, but you do it anyway. That's like saying, here, take a pistol and blow one of your toes off. Like you wouldn't do that, but you would go and eat a Mars bar again and again and again and again. And you don't really, I think that's, again, going back to why this problem in the first place actually occurs. I think it's behavioral habits on a daily basis. We don't understand how they stack up. You don't just wake up one morning after eating junk food and be like, oh my God, look at the size of me. Like it's not a surprise. There is no shock factor. It's just that gradual erosion of your mental and physical health. And yes, I am including mental health in this because in terms of you are what you eat and your gut microbiome playing a role, I believe, I don't want to go into the details of it because I don't fully understand it, but I believe there is more involved in that than we perceive. If you constantly eat junk food, if you constantly put shit in your body, it cannot not affect you mentally. It has to have a mental impact. So bearing that in mind, we need to change the quality of foods we're eating. And people like I get pissed off with a lot of trainers saying, "Oh, there's no good foods and bad foods." The fucking is. There is. There is highly nutritious foods and low nutrition foods that are very high calorie and have very little use for your mind and body as a human. We're not starving. We don't need that really dense, high calorie, bloody chocolate bar over an apple. Good foods and bad foods exist. Like, accept the reality. Like, this is where people are kind of sleepwalking into it and going, oh, my trainer said I can eat this chocolate. It's like, no, fuck no. Like, if you've got a goal, if you've got a specific weight loss or health issue you need to face up to, you're not fucking doing it if you don't, if you're deadly serious about this and your mind is right, you cannot be pissing around eating shit foods now and again, thinking you can control it. The majority of your behaviors and eating habits have been formed previously because your emotional control and your self-awareness have been out of whack. What makes you think you can possibly start balancing your diet by playing around and fannying around without having clear guidelines of what you will and will not eat? Decide what you want in your daily habits and start acting accordingly. Don't try and get clever of going, oh, well, if I eat this tuna salad wrap, then I can have this fucking tub of ice cream later on. Stop doing it. If it's not going to be useful for your physical and mental development, stop fucking doing it. Hold yourself to high standards. Feel better now. Education. This is always a fun one. Schools. How much of a role should school play when it comes to looking after kids in terms of them being physically healthy? You cannot force people, and I don't necessarily think it's a school issue where schools have to carry out the majority of the education, but I certainly think health and fitness education should be fundamental in schools. And what I mean by that, I think having very robust physical education programs where there is a variety of sports, there's a multitude of sports where everyone feels they can get involved, everyone feels that they can enjoy it and enjoy exercising and enjoy using their body, followed by after school curriculum, which I think is probably even more important and bigger than simply including it in the school curriculum during the day. Like teachers are already stretched. Teachers already have issues that they need to cope with and deal with in terms of chasing results for English, maths, and science, and all the fundamental things that they need kids to learn and kids should be thinking about and studying. But certainly, should every school start the day? Arguably, with some form of health and fitness program to get their bodies going, get their minds energized, and get their hearts and lungs working. I firmly think that that would be a very useful way to go about it. And I wouldn't have teachers leading that. I think that would have to be led by either someone in the school that is employed by the school or is externally brought into the school as part of a private company to lead some sort of group exercise session or private club, where it could be something really, really simple, but just to get the kids energized, get them moving and get them working. My firm belief on this is that parents have to be the leaders in this section. Parents have to be the main focal point for teaching kids how to eat, how to move, how to exercise, how to think, how to live. And when I say how to think, I don't mean what to think, but how to think about specific problems, how to think about themselves, how to develop themselves and build their own self-esteem, which is another topic I will come into a little bit more later on. But physical health and well-being should underpin the education. I would say worldwide, but certainly in the UK. Again, foods that get served in school cafeterias. Get rid of the junk. Include more plant-based foods, healthier foods. Again, this is where availability of affordable, healthy, local produce comes into play. Include more fruits and vegetables. And I would get rid of the crap in school cafeterias. They don't need a dessert with lunch. I remember when I was on school days as a kid growing up, and it was like, oh well, here's your chocolate cake and custard. I'm like, thinking about it now, I'm like, I didn't need that. That was no good for me. And then no wonder why kids are falling asleep in the fucking afternoon in the middle of class. No wonder I was tired. We don't need that. So education, food quality, and then availability of after school clubs. Again, most working people don't finish until I'd say 5 in the evening. I don't think that's necessarily true. Like when I've been out and about, I mean, I'm self-employed, so I tend to go out during the day when other people are at work. There's no queues for anything. Everyone's working, so everything is serviceable. Your waiting times are reduced, and you haven't got people getting in your way. It's simply not the case when you get to like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock sometimes, and even on a Friday, people say, "Oh, I work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5." No, you fucking don't. Sometimes Friday lunchtime, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, when I think, "Oh, well, I'll go there. This will be easy." Absolutely rammed. Not good. So, but most people won't finish. I'm having a little rant about traffic now. Most people won't finish till later on in the evening, later on in the afternoon. So have an abundance of after school clubs, various different sporting activities led by professionals that coach in those areas that kids can engage with. That would probably be more useful to the kids than having an abundance of PE classes led by teachers that don't want to teach PE. Again, use people for what their skill sets are designed for. If you've got a maths teacher that's really, really good at teaching maths, let them teach bloody maths. Don't force them to go in and teach PE. So an abundance of after school clubs, make it a priority, make it, if we can make that free or at least incredibly affordable where, again, people aren't having to spend a fortune on people looking after their kids. You've not got people having to take time out of work to finish early to go and do, like, you can go and you can live your own life. Even if you were able to finish your own working day at 3 o'clock, go to the gym, train yourself, then go and pick your kids up whilst they've done their PE, you do your adult PE. Life balance. Well, not life balance, but life priorities. The next one, tax on junk foods. But this is something that we've kind of already got in place at the minute anyway with the sugar tax. I would maintain that. I would keep that in there. And I suppose what could you try and do? Could you maybe increase that and then try and offset that against the cost of healthy foods? Possibly. I don't want to get into a social credit system where we are essentially giving cash back to people that go to the gym 5 times a week, train, play sport, and are physically healthy, because I don't believe that the social credit system is any good for anybody, like that communist or highly controlled, live your life like this. I don't think that is a good way to go whatsoever. But I do think that what we should do is put guidelines in place that make it easier for people to make better choices and better decisions. And I think the final point, improve nutrition labels. At the minute, there's a lot of leeway with regards to nutrition labels and the calorie amounts and the breakdown of foods. Like there is a certain amount of inaccuracy allowed, which I don't believe is actually helpful in any way. And I would also 100% cut the bullshit when it comes to companies going, oh, well, this has this many calories per portion. And you look at the portion size, and the portion size is a quarter of your chocolate bar. So you're eating 4 times the number of calories. Like if you get, I mean, I don't buy chocolate bars, but like if you were to, or even if you were to buy a bottle of energy drink or fizzy sugary pop, like it goes, oh, well, a portion size is half a bottle. No, it's not. Who is drinking half a bottle and leaving it? Who is eating a quarter of a chocolate bar and leaving it till tomorrow, making it last 4 days? Nonsense. Whatever that is included in that packet, that is the portion. Indicate the calorie amount based off what is in the packet and help people make it easier. People don't need to be doing mental arithmetic when they go and buy a chocolate bar for once. And again, this is where my personal take on it. I very rarely eat chocolate bars and very rarely go and buy that. I don't actually remember the last time I went and bought a chocolate bar. Deadly serious. Not something I eat, but I will occasionally go and buy a tub of ice cream. And when I do, I don't look at the calories on it. I go with a tub of ice cream that I like, and I'll generally eat the full fucking amount because it's that rare that I would go and do it. It doesn't matter to me. It's meh. Because I know that the rest of my habits are in check, that I have the freedom to go and do such things. So, for instance, tonight we're off to a meat house place. I am fasting through the day. I'm not going to eat anything. I want to save myself to be able to eat as much food as humanly possible this evening. Again, the calorie amount that I'll consume tonight will be irrelevant in comparison to what I would have eaten anyway. I'll still track it. I will still keep an eye on it. I will still be aware of how much I'm eating. But because I'm not eating during the day and chances of me eating 3,500 calories in a meal, I reckon I can do it. I reckon I can do it. I back myself. Overall, it should still balance out. It will still balance out. I'll make it balance out. And yes, so I would make improving nutrition labels more of a priority. Force these companies to be clearer on their packaging so that you don't have to do the sums in your head. And then the last bit, mental health and well-being playing a huge role. I hate those two things at the moment. I really hate those two things. It is the easiest get out clause of any fucking problem you can imagine at the minute. If you're struggling, oh, my mental health and well-being's taking a bit of a downturn. Oh, well, have a few weeks off. Go and feel better about yourself. Fuck off. Who has the right and the ability to walk through life without facing any sort of adversity and difficulty? Why have we become so weak where we think, oh, well, everything should be handy? I just want to be happy. What do you mean you just want to be? I just want to be happy all the time. It's like you don't want to experience any sort of great sadness. Like you have no right to choose that or decide that. What about instead of whinging about your mental health and well-being, what if you just focused on working on your own self-esteem? What if you went and faced up to a problem and did something incredibly difficult and you were successful? Instead of going, oh, my mental health. I don't know why I'm saying it in that voice, but that's just the way I imagine that people who struggle with mental health would actually talk about this. And I know that's not true. There are plenty of examples. I know plenty of my friends that work in this sector where mental health is at the forefront. Again, I don't like it being an excuse, and I don't think it should be an excuse for anybody. I don't want it to be an excuse for anybody, but those people certainly, if you are genuinely struggling with your mental health and you're feeling incredibly shit about life to the point where you're thinking about ending it, please don't go and get help. And if you were to speak to me about these issues, the way that I think I would approach this, which I have done in the past with people, I've had people who have been on the edge and have massively turned their life around. I've had people who have been through some of the worst circumstances imaginable, not just the worst circumstances I've ever heard of, but like the worst circumstances imaginable. You wouldn't wish upon anybody, and they've turned their lives around. And a lot of that has come through a little bit of clarity, a little bit of direction, a little bit of support, a little bit of focus, and that bit of a push and a bit of confidence to say, go on, you've got it, you can do this. And when they accomplish something that is incredibly, it doesn't have to be incredibly difficult to start with, it could just be something that is challenging. The work and the wonders that does for their self-esteem is enormous. I'll give you one example. There was one of my clients, she'd been through a lot, an awful lot already. And then this is someone who I trained for years and consider as one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And she got to the point where she wanted to set herself an incredible challenge. She wanted to go and do a Tough Mudder, the full Tough Mudder, the full 13, 14 miles, over obstacles, through the mud, through the shit, and challenge herself. She's never run before. She's never really run 13 miles. She's never, really considered going out running excessively on a regular basis. Never really doing a 5 mile or anything like that. And I said, all right, let's do it. We'll do it at the end of the year, towards, I think it was like August, September time kind of thing. So like next year. And I said to her a couple of months later, I think around February, March time, I said, listen, we've got a problem. You know how I said I was going to be available on these dates? I'm not. I am available on these dates, which is when the next Tough Mudder is. And it's in this location, which is perfectly reachable for us. Do you want to do it? And she wanted to raise money for charity. I felt really bad because it was really rushed. It got pushed forwards about 5 months, and to the point where it was literally a month and a half away. I said, I think you can do it. I know you can do it. Are you in? And she thought about it. I could tell she was thinking, oh, fuck, it's real. And we did it. She was in. She was like, yeah, all right, let's go. And we got signed up. We turned up on the day, and she'd been through all the fundraising. She'd done everything in advance of it to prepare herself, and she wanted to do the full thing. She didn't want to duck any obstacles. She didn't want to dive out of the way. She didn't want to say cheat anything. She didn't want to skirt around anything. And there were two moments for me that stood out. Obviously, long story short, she nailed the entire thing. It was one of the obstacles early on where you had to crawl, and it's like tight spaces, dark spaces, uncomfortable. A lot of people's worst nightmares. Like, a lot of people tend to panic in those situations. I think it might have been called birth canal or something like that. I think that was the obstacle, where it's just essentially this massive water poured into this kind of material over the top, and as you crawl through it, you kind of displace the water and you're getting squashed to the floor. There's not much room. And I'd been through it, come back round to get her, be like, right, we're doing it. You go in. I put her in the end one so I could still see where she was. I could still talk to her. And she crawled in, and she gets about halfway through, and she turns out to the side. I could just like barely see her face popping out. And she's like, I'm stuck. I can't do it. And I was thinking, she tried to crawl out, and I went, get back in there. You can. And I said, I think I said, I didn't force her, I didn't drag her, I didn't pull her. I like, she got no help. I just told her, put your arm there, pull that through. And she managed to drag herself along. She continued with a little bit of forward progress. She just needed that extra little inch of movement to just push a little bit beyond where she was, and she was away, and she carried on. She nailed that. Then the next one, I think one of the favorites is always the whichever one's the ice bath. I can't remember the actual name for it, like deep freeze or something funky, where you sit at the top of this like, essentially cage or slide or shipping container. You slide down it into this freezing cold water, and we both sat at the top. We were able to go in two at a time, so we went in next to each other. And I looked at her and was like, "Are you ready?" And she went, "You could see you know when you can see the fear in someone's face, and they're like, I'm shit scared, but I'm going anyway." It was that situation. We both dropped in. She landed in the water, and you know when you come out and you're like, and you can't breathe. She did that. I just grabbed her. I was like, "Right, look at me," and she calmed down. She got control of her breathing, and I went. We then had to go under a series of tires that were in the water. So you had to go underwater underneath these tires and pop out the other side before you could climb out. I said, breathe, take a breath. And I said, we're going. She looked at me, she was like, okay. I was like, three, two, one, dunked her, shoved her underneath these tires, and then she popped out the other side. Just like, I was like, well done. Sorry, but well done. And again, when it comes to self-esteem, doing things for yourself, improving your own self-confidence, tackling challenging obstacles, there is nothing more rewarding. You can't fake it. You can't manufacture it. You can't create it through just saying it. You actually have to go and physically do these things and challenge yourself and come through them. You know, people always say, "Oh, you know, tough times will make you stronger," and you know, I've been through hell, but I'm better for it. And I think it's part of that is understanding that if you're going through an incredibly difficult time, you have to keep going. And I'm not sure that mental health and well-being education or just learning about these things and speaking to people in a nice manner or you know pandering to people's bullshit is the way to fix it. It is not. The best way to fix it is go out, do something fucking difficult, do something for yourself, do something to improve your own life, handle your business, and that will move you forwards. And for me, those, how many is that? One, two, three, four, five. And then if we include the self-esteem, education, six fixes. I feel like, well, you might have to let me know differently on this, but I feel like that would put us on the right track to actually solving some of these problems. And I think the biggest bugbear I have is that there isn't a single politician out there, there isn't a single leader out there who I think prioritizes this and embodies it and embraces it and behaves in a manner that encompasses this. And we are severely lacking leadership, we're severely lacking physical and mental fortitude across the entire leadership spectrum. And for me, that is a massive vacuum that needs to be fixed. And I think the way to fix it is on a micro level where if you're listening to this, go out and be that person. Go and be that leader. Go and be that person that helps other people, helps them get beyond a struggle, helps them through difficult times, challenging times, and be that little bit of a glimmer of hope, that example that will actually help someone through to the next level. If you can do that, you're in the top 1% of human beings that have ever lived, in my opinion. And I don't say that lightly. I think that would be probably, I think that is going to be the most rewarding thing that anyone can ever do is not just to help other people, but be the example for other people and give them that bit of guidance. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed recording this episode and rambling to myself, and I apologize if it's not what you wanted to hear, but that concludes episode number 90 of the Lenko Show, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything to do with health, performance, fitness, mindset, nutrition, coaching, physical training, trying to tackle it all. We've got some big problems in the world that we need to take care of, and I think it starts with controlling the shit that we can control. Anyway, that is it from me for this episode. I will be back next time. I'll probably be looking into, I've already got this kind of mapped out a little bit. I'll be looking into the issues with Paul Pogba, who has just been banned for 4 years for doping, and then also the athletic viewpoint of what Marcus Rashford has come out and said recently with regards to people knowing him and people understanding who he is and how he works. And for some reason, he's felt the need to issue a relatively in-depth statement. So we will be digging into a couple of those things and a few other athletic bits that I've picked out here and there that I think we can all learn from. So until next time, look after yourselves, train hard, train smart, eat well, eat like an adult, and I'll see you again soon. Lenko out.